Welcome back to the fifth lecture in the History of Medicine lecture series presented by Dr.M.V.L.Kothari, Chair and Division of Medical Humanities. It is great to see all of you again after the span of 1 week, and I hope you're as excited for this lecture as I am. Before we begin, a few ground rules. Please maintain your mic off at all times. Should you have any questions during the duration of this lecture, please put it down in the chat box below and we will address them at the end of the lecture. So, the first time I entered the college building, I was struck by how different it was from all the steel, glass, and concrete built structures that dominate the Mumbai skyline today. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that these stone walls, if they could speak, would tell interesting stories about the towering personalities they've housed and the momentous occasions they've witnessed over the past 96 years. Unfortunately, the walls can't talk. Fortunately, we do have with us today someone who has been associated with this institution for several decades. Please allow me to introduce him. Dr. Sunil Pandya completed his MBBS and MS in General Surgery in Grant Medical College and Sir J.J. Group of Hospitals. He further trained in neurosurgery under the guidance of Dr. Gajendra Singh at J.J. Hospital and Dr. Homi Dastoor at KEM Hospital, and pursued further specialty training in the Institute of Neurology and the Institute of Child Health in London. He was a professor of neurosurgery at St. J.S. from 1975 to 1998. Dr. Pandya has extensively written not just about neurosurgery, but also about the history of medicine and ethics in medicine. He is the emeritus editor of the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics and serves on the editorial boards of medical journals such as the National Medical Journal of India. Dr. Pandya is also the chairperson of the Dr.M.V.L.Kothari Chair and Division of Medical Humanities at KEM Hospital. Today, he shall be telling us all about the genesis of our beloved institution, St. J.S. Medical College and King Edward Memorial Hospital. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. I would like to pay I think I've accidentally got muted on my screen. So I'd like to pay a tribute to you for the excellent manner in which you have been conducting this series of talks. It has gained you admiration amongst many, many people, and very deservedly so. Let's start off with the topic at hand, and that is, how were this medical college and hospital thought of, how were they planned, and how did they come into being? Now, for a long, long time, medical education and medical care in British India was in the hands of what was called the Indian Medical Service. This Indian Medical Service was obviously a part of the East India Company. And since there were three major provinces or presidencies in the country, the Indian Medical Service also had three major branches. The first branch to be formed was naturally in Bengal, because Calcutta was the capital of India under the East India Company. And the whole of India was governed by the East India Company from Calcutta. This governance was through its branches in the other two presidencies, namely Madras and Bombay. But once the three presidency medical services were functioning well, they were amalgamated into one system, and that system was named the Indian Medical Service. Entry into the Indian Medical Service was via selection in England. And in order to be selected into the Indian Medical Service and to be allowed to come out to India and practice medicine and teach medicine and take care in healthcare, the officers, who were all army officers, were trained at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Netley. And every one of them is inducted as an army medical officer. In the initial phase, when medical colleges were founded, and we will not go into the genesis of the Grand Medical and the Calcutta Medical and the Madras Medical, because that's a completely different story. Once these medical colleges had been founded, and the Grand Medical College in Bombay was founded in 1845, the teachers at that time, from say 1845 up to about 1870 or even 1880, the teachers were of excellent caliber. They had the best interests of the public and of the medical students under their care at heart, and they did everything possible to put medical education on a very sound footing. In fact, they put it on such a sound footing that the Grand Medical College was recognized not only within India, but also internationally, especially in Britain. Unfortunately, as time passed by, the IMS officers, the Indian Medical Service officers, became somewhat arrogant, and they felt that they were the only people who were qualified and capable of teaching medicine. Now, this was correct in 1845 because there were no Indian physicians who were trained in modern medicine. But it certainly was not true in the 1880s and the 1890s, because by that time, Indian doctors not only had they trained in India, but they also went to England and they came back with qualifications like the membership of the Royal College of Physicians and the membership of the Royal College of Surgeons and the fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons. So they came back with very high qualifications. But the British did not like that. Yeah, I think when you mute everybody, I also get muted. Democracy at work. So,
I'm Ravi here, sir. We can hear you all the time.
okay. So, in the 1880s, 1890s, we had excellent Indian physicians who were more than competent to teach, and they were also willing and eager to teach. They wanted to pay their debt to the Indian society by teaching other Indians to become doctors of the highest caliber. But the British did not like that. The IMS officers of the 1870s, 1880s didn't like that. And so they tended to squash all applications from Indian physicians for the post of assistant professor or professor in the Grand Medical College. Now, one such physician who came back with absolutely brilliant qualifications was Dr. Kaikhushru Bahadurji. he was referred to by Dr. Ramanna in the talk last week. You can see his qualifications, MB and BS London and MD London. He was the first non-British candidate to be awarded the MD in Medicine of London. He had worked with Dr. Robert Koch in Berlin. And so he had an eminent, what we would call biodata when he returned to India. Now, when he returned to Bombay, Lord Ray, who was the governor, was quite considerate, and he felt that with his kind of zeal and energy and qualifications, he should be appointed to the Grand Medical College. So he appointed him as an extra professor of clinical medicine and pharmacology and gave him the charge of the FD Petit Laboratory, which was the experimental wing of the medical college. Now, when the governor appoints him, the IMS officers in the college couldn't do anything to stall that appointment. So he was appointed. But they certainly made his life very, very difficult. And after some time, continuation in this position was untenable for him. So he made a few propositions. Seeing that the British IMS officers were not going to change, he advocated splitting the Indian medical service into the military branch and the civil branch. And the civil branch was to run the medical colleges. And all professorial posts in the civil branch of the IMS were to be open to all eligible candidates on merit. And obviously that included Indian candidates who qualified. And he insisted that they should be purely on merit. But the IMS officers didn't like that, and this was frustrated. He then tried to work towards creating a new medical college in Bombay, which would be staffed by Indians. And this was in the late 1880s and the early 1890s. But unfortunately, he didn't live to see his dream fulfilled. He died of tuberculosis in 1898. However, we have the satisfaction that his brother, Mr. D.N. Bahadurji, played a role in the formation of the GS Medical College. Now, in 1883, as part of their struggle to get Indian doctors recognized and to break the monopoly of the IMS on the professorial posts of the Grand Medical College, some prominent Indian doctors in Bombay formed what they called the Bombay Medical Union. And amongst the pioneers were the names which I have put up over here. I have already introduced Dr. Bahadurji to you. The other name which you may not be aware of is Dr. Atmaram Pandurang Tarkar. Dr. Atmaram Pandurang was a member of the first batch of students to join the Grand Medical College in 1845. And he graduated from the Grand Medical College. Now, at that time, there was no University of Bombay. The University of Bombay was founded much later, in 1857. So the qualification that was given to Atmaram Pandurang, to Dr. Bhau Daji, and to all their colleagues from the first batch, second batch, third batch, fourth batch of the Grand Medical College was GGMC, Graduate of the Grand Medical College. And this, once the University of Bombay was formed and the Grand Medical College was affiliated in the University of Bombay, this GGMC disappeared. One of the other And Dr. Atmaram Pandurang Tarkar was an outstanding physician, outstanding social worker, and an outstanding fighter for the rights of Indian doctors in Bombay. He had a very worthy colleague in Sir Bhalchandra Krishna Bhatwadekar, who was also a brilliant student of the Grand Medical College and a very vociferous person struggling for the rights of Indian doctors. Then we had Dr. G.V. Deshmukh. We will come to Dr. G.V. Deshmukh a little later because he was instrumental in the actual formation of the medical college and the hospital in the Municipal Corporation of Bombay. In those days, senior physicians felt that it was their duty to participate in the management of the civic affairs of the city. And Dr. G.V. Deshmukh was very prominent amongst this group. This is Dr. Atmaram Pandurang. And this is what he had written in a newspaper called The Native Opinion on the 12th of March, 1885. This is actually a report in The Native Opinion of his talk. And as you will read, Dr. Atmaram Pandurang, a worthy townsman, puts forth a few suggestions. And like Bahadurji and like many others, he laid down very, very logical steps, saying that individuals who were meritorious and who qualified purely on merit should be considered as teachers of at the Grand Medical College. This is Bhalchandra Bhatwadekar. Now look at the statement which he gives, which shows the extent to which the IMS officers would stoop to prevent Indian doctors from getting positions in Grand Medical College. And this is what he wrote. I can tell you that an IMS professor was considered to be fit to take up the chair of anatomy. Okay, that's fine. If the guy is good in anatomy and maybe in surgery, there's no reason why he cannot be selected to become a professor of anatomy. But immediately afterwards, he was deemed fit to take up the chair of materia medica. Materia medica is what pharmacology was called in those days. So a person who was a professor of anatomy, within a few months, was deemed fit enough to be a professor of pharmacology. And finally, this man was put in charge of the chair of surgery. And Bhatwadekar made this very, very telling comment. Each of these sciences require a study of a lifetime. Let's come now to Saint Gurdandas Sundardas Medical College. Up to 1907, the city of Bombay, that means the Municipal Corporation of Bombay, had to pay a certain sum to the police. And that was called the police charges. And this was meant to compensate the police for looking after the law and order in the city of Bombay. This was disputed because after some time, the municipal corporation said, look, this is not correct. We are providing many, many services of our own. So why should you charge us for this? And this dispute, which was going on for almost 3 decades between the government and the corporation, was concluded by the passing of Act number 3 of 1907. And this was a very important act which made it possible to consider the formation of a second medical college and hospital. By this act, the city was relieved of all liability for police charges. But there was a cost to be paid. They said, okay, you don't want to pay police charges, that's fine. But then now it is your responsibility to take over vaccination, medical relief, primary education, and making a certain contribution to higher education, which had hitherto fallen on the government of Bombay. Now, the pioneer who had fought to get this Act number 3 of 1907 passed was Firoz Shah Mehta. And he was a far-sighted individual. He knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. And so that is why he had waged an incessant and protracted fight, both in the Legislative Council and in the municipal corporation, to ensure that this act went through. In one corner of the city of Bombay, there was a huge cloth market, wholesale cloth market. This wholesale cloth market had been set up by a person who, when he came to Bombay, he was a pauper. He had virtually no money. Mulji Jetha was born in 1804. He died in 1888. Through sheer hard work, he rose to become a cotton magnate and originated the idea of a cloth market, which stands in his name in Bombay even today, and is considered the largest in the Eastern Hemisphere at that time. This is the only image which I could find of Mulji Jetha. It is not satisfactory, but I'm sorry I couldn't find anything better than this. Now, this is his family tree, Mulji Jetha. Mulji Jetha had one son, Sundar Das Mulji. And Sundar Das Mulji died in 1875 before his father died. So it was a relatively premature death. Now, Sundar Das Mulji had two sons, Dharamsi Sundar Das and Gordhan Das Sundar Das. We are concerned with Gordhan Das Sundar Das, but we'll just discuss the others very briefly because they have an important role to play. Dharamsi Sundar Das, as you can see, died in the same year as his grandfather, Mulji Jetha. Now, Dharamsi Sundar Das had a son called Karsan Das Dharamshi. And Gordhan Das Sundar Das married a lady called Gangabai, but they had no children. Gordhan Das Sundar Das died in 1902. Now, after Gordhan Das Sundar Das was dead, and by that time Dharamsi also was dead, this Karsan Das, either on his own initiative or because he was egged on by relatives and by others, he tried to usurp all the funds of Mulji Jetha company. Now, when Gordhan Das and Gangabai had no child, they adopted a boy called Chatur Bhuj Gordhan Das as a son. So now Gordhan Das and Gangabai had an adopted son. But Karsan Das Dharamsi was a genuine son, not adopted, a genetic son of Dharamsi. And this Karsan Das tried to usurp all the funds of Mulji Jetha company, which were huge. I mean, even by today's standard, they were mind-boggling sums of money. Now, this obviously was not acceptable to Gangabai or to Chatur Bhuj Gordhan Das. This is the only picture I can find of Godandas Sundardas, and you will also find it in all the souvenirs, the Silver Jubilee, Golden Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee souvenir or medical college and hospital. You will find this picture everywhere there. But this is the only picture. I can't find any other picture. Now, because this chap was trying to usurp the funds, there was a lot of litigation going on. And in the course of the litigation, the judges decided that they would appoint 3 individuals to help the. 1 minute, let me just try and get this out of the way. So the court appointed 3 legal experts to help resolve this crisis. And the 3 experts were outstanding experts, unimpeachable, unchallengeable, men of proven integrity and with no interest in gaining anything from the estate. And you can see the names of these 3 individuals over here. So Firozshah Mehta, of course, everybody knows. Sir Chimanlal Settlewad was a very, very great lawyer. And Sir Narayan Chandawat. Put it here, it causes a problem. Okay. So this arbitration, as you might expect, took a lot of time and went on for several years actually. And after arbitration, the court set aside 14.5 lakhs from the Murji Jetha estate, which was to be used for a charitable purpose. All these 3 arbitrators, all these 3 experts knew about the problems which were there with Indian doctors at the Grand Medical College. They knew of the efforts which had been made by Dr. Bahadurji, who had struggled very hard to create a separate medical college where Indian doctors could teach. But of course, because he died, he couldn't see that college. So when this sum of 14.5 lakhs was set aside from the Murji Jetha estate, Chimanlal Settlewad, by mutual arrangement, was appointed one of the trustees for this purpose. And so the trustees and the Advocate General, Mr. D.N. Bahadurji, who was the brother of K.N. Bahadurji, they decided to use this sum for the creation of a medical college in Bombay. Because they were aware of Dr. Bahadurji's efforts and his frustration. And in his book, Settlewad Writes, I discussed the matter with Firozshah. They were of the same seniority and on very friendly terms, so they could talk to each other like that. He suggested that an offer of endowment be made to the Bombay Municipal Corporation for the foundation of a medical college to be attached to the proposed King Edward Memorial Hospital. Now, King Edward had died by that time, and funds had been collected for memorials to him. And as we shall see, several of these funds resulted in medical colleges being founded. So the funds for the hospital were available. There were no funds for the medical college. And so Firoz Shah Mehta suggested, you put up a proposal to the Bombay Municipal Corporation that we are willing to pay 14.5 lakhs for the establishment of a medical college. Now, he was very, very particular. One of the conditions was to be that the staff of the college should be recruited entirely from the independent Indian medical practitioners of the city. Note the word recruited entirely from the independent Indian medical practitioners. That means somebody who had nothing to do with the government of Bombay. Now, if that was accepted by the municipal corporation, then automatically the staff at the hospital, who were the professors at the college, would also be from the independent medical practitioners. And so that is what he proposed. And remember that Firoz Shah Mehta was a very powerful voice in the municipal corporation. So when he made this suggestion, he made it with very, very careful thought and planning behind this move. And it worked. Because now we have this institution which has been present since 1926, the Seth G.S. Medical College. Actually, sometimes I get a little worried when I read G.S. Medical College, KEM Hospital, D.N. Road, and things like that, because if you ask somebody who was D.N., they don't know who D.N. was. They don't know it refers to Dadabhai Naoroji. And my fear is that someday somebody will say, we don't know who GS was. And that would be a real pity. However, this is the plaque which can be seen even today. And this is the plaque which was erected when the college was finally opened. As you can read, the work on this began in June 1925. And the college was opened formally on the 22nd of January 1926 by the governor. Now that was the convention that any big institution in the city has to be inaugurated by the governor. And Jivraj Mehta, the dean, had already been appointed as the dean before the college could function again, could start functioning. There's an interesting little point to be made about this colorful plaque over here. This colorful plaque represents the coat of arms of the city of Bombay. You can see some ships and you can see the municipal corporation building and so on. But this was not there when the plaque was set up. There was another plaque at the bottom, and somebody has gone and put this plaque on top. Now, I didn't understand all this, so I had asked our intrepid historian Rahul Kothari, and he and his mother were walking past this plaque, and they realized that this is something which has been stuck on the original plaque. So this is detective work done by Rahul and his mother. The person who is honored on the right-hand side is George Whitted. George Whitted was an architect, British architect, and he was appointed as the chief architect for the government of Bombay. That means the public works departments and other such construction. And there are many buildings which Whitted has worked on. He died in Bombay, and this is his grave in the Sydney graveyard. You can see it even today. So that is the story in brief of the medical college. Now let us turn to the hospital. And this is King Edward VII. This King Edward VII, like King Charles III of England, remained a Prince of Wales for a very, very long time. This man was the Prince of Wales at the age of 1 month, and he remained so till the age of 60 years when his mother, Queen Victoria, died. And that is when he became the King of England. Somewhat similar to the story of King Charles III of England. Now, he had visited Bombay, and he died on 6th of May, 1910. Now, in many cities, funds were collected when King Edward died, and in several of these cities, it was decided to use these funds for the creation of a hospital. So, similar hospitals as in Bombay were proposed in Pune. So there was a KEM hospital in Pune, KEM hospital in Lahore, KEM hospital in Adelaide, and there's a KEM hospital in Bermuda. Now, it is important to remember that King Edward VII's hospital in London was not formed after his death. It was formed well before he died, and the king was its patron. And that is why it is called King Edward VII Hospital in London. So that is not part of this memorial group. When Firoz Shah Mehta and others in the municipal corporation were considering as to where they should put this hospital and medical college from the funds which had very fortunately become available to them, they decided that it should be in what was at that time called Girangaon. Girangaon is the Marathi term for the mill workers district. And so this hospital and medical college was set up in the middle of where the mill workers lived and worked. And it was primarily meant to be for the use of such poor individuals as mill workers. So the ball started rolling. Secretaries of the fund wrote to the municipal corporation, we have collected 5,75,000 for the creation of the hospital. The government will grant you land, 50,000 square yards, on the Parel Government House estate. The market value at that time was 4 lakhs. Now, this government house estate was a huge estate. It was part of an old Jesuit seminary, which the British took over, and then they built this palace for the governor to live in. And in fact, it was the residence of the governor of Bombay for many, many years. Then one of the wives of the governors died from an infectious disease. And so the subsequent governors decided to move to a more salubrious area, and that was Malabar Hill. And so this palatial structure, which was once upon a time the residence of the governor, with ballrooms and all kinds of fancy things in it, was now available to the public. And eventually, it became the Haffkin Institute. And the land, which was an enormous amount of land, was parceled out, part of which came to the GS Medical College and KM Hospital, part of which became Wadia Maternity, part of which became Wadia Children's Hospital, and part of which became Tata Memorial Hospital. So that huge property was eventually parceled out, and fortunately for us, these formed a ring of very, very important medical institutions in Parel. So they said, look, we are willing to give you all this. 5,75,000, 50,000 square yards. But you have to construct a hospital with 220 beds. And you have to maintain the hospital. Which, of course, Firozshah Mehta and all the others were very eagerly waiting to do, because they wanted the administration of these institutions to be in their hands. So in 1913, Vitet was asked to draw up the plans. Now, he drew up his plans, but they were sent to Mr. W.A. Pite, who in London, and he was the architect who had designed King's College Hospital in London. The eventual cost of the hospital was 21 lakhs. So, to meet the deficit, additional donations were sought, and here are some of the additional donations from the Karim Boy Ibrahim Fund, Nathu Bhai Fund, Habib Jan Muhammad Fund, and so on. And this was the hospital. I feel it is very sad that these beautiful domes which adorn the roofs of our hospital have gone the way of all flesh. And here is another view of the hospital and the nameplate which says 1926. You can see all those domes have disappeared, no more domes, which is a pity because they were so beautiful. And then this was the map which was drawn in 1926. And you will see that what is called the Parel Road, at that time was called the King Edward Road, and S.S. Rao Road was called the Government Gate Road, and the avenue in front of the hospital and medical college were called the Hospital Avenue Road. And this is how the structure was laid out. Now, it is very, very, this is a subsequent, much later map, which gives a little more detail of the various structures. And this is how the Times of India showed Bombay's new hospital. And it was a matter of great pride. And once again, on the hospital building, you can see those beautiful domes. You can see it on the top picture and even in the middle picture. The domes are now all gone. Now, this is the plaque at the entrance to the King Edward VII Memorial Hospital, in front of what we used to call the honoraries room. And you will see that this was the original plaque. This one. This was the original plaque. Not that colorful stuff which was put on later, but this was the original plaque. And that discovery is Dr. Kothari and his mother. And this plaque, of course, gives details about the various donors and who opened it and who was the municipal commissioner. And of course, Jivraj Mehta as the dean of the medical college. And this is Dr. Jivraj Mehta. And Dr. Hansa Jivraj Mehta is a fair lady, or better half, or better 9/10, or whatever you would like to call it. I personally feel that she deserves a lot of attention from us. You know, they all say behind a great man stands a greater lady. It is certainly true in the case of Jivraj Mehta. Hansa Mehta was an extraordinary individual. This is not the time or place to talk about her, but she deserves a lot more attention than we in KEM Hospital and GS Medical College have given her. Now, when the hospital was founded, in keeping with the best traditions of British medical institutions, an annual report was published. And that annual report was published by the Dean. And knowing Dr. Jivraj Mehta, because I had the unique privilege of being able to meet him 3 times, I know how particular he was about everything. So knowing him, I'm sure that every single word in the initial reports were passed through his eyes and through his scrutiny. Now, when he made the initial appointments of physicians, surgeons, etc., these were all extremely eminent people. Jivraj Mehta himself, very, very eminent physician. Dr. M.D.D. Gilder, Dr. P.C. Barucha, who was the father of Dr. Eddie Barucha, who founded our Department of Neurology at the KEM. Dr. A.S. Erulkar, Jewish physician. Dr. P.T. Patel, Dr. G.V. Deshmukh, Bacha, R.N. Cooper, Shirvalkar, V.L. Parmar. V.L. Parmar was very briefly in KEM Hospital. And then, of course, we have Dr. Purandare, Herculiano Nisa, and Dosibai Dadabai, and V.R. Khanolkar. So these were the galaxy of teachers that were appointed to the GS Medical College and to the KEM Hospital as staff members. Now, one of the first things that Jivraj Mehta had to do was to get his institutions recognized by the University of Bombay. And so he immediately moved the syndicate of the University of Bombay and requested them to send a committee to inspect the medical college for the purpose of affiliation to the university. Now, you will remember that the college and hospital opened in 1926. But in 1925, already, Jivraj Mehta had got one set of inspection completed by the experts. And you will see that in the opening sentence. At the time of our first inspection in June 1925, the hospital was still under construction. The library and laboratories were not complete, etc., etc., etc. So this is the second inspection. And during the second inspection, they said that the rapid progress has been made. It is complete, ready for occupation. The library contains a lot of reference works, 300 beds, palatial buildings, well ventilated and well kept. And the people who had been asked to carry out this survey of the hospital were amongst the cream of the medical profession in Bombay. There was Dr. Raghavendra Rao. Dr. Raghavendra Rao was a pathologist who started the pathology school at the Grand Medical College. Dr. S.L. Bhatia. Dr. S.L. Bhatia was the dean of the Grand Medical College. Dr. Y.G. Nadgir. In spite of the opposition of the Indian Medical Service officers, Dr. Y.G. Nadgir was appointed as professor of anatomy. merely because of his outstanding skills, and Dr. R.N. Ranina. Now, the credit which goes to the description of palatial, well-ventilated, well-kept buildings goes entirely to Dr. Jivraj Mehta. Dr. Jivraj Mehta had made a deep study of architecture of hospitals in countries in the tropics. And he was fortunate in that he had a book which had been written by none other than Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale never visited India, but she had studied the conditions in India, and on the basis of those conditions, she had made certain recommendations. Number one, do not have walls which are divided into small compartments. Have long and wide walls where air and light could circulate freely, because that is the best way of ensuring that infection is kept at the bare minimum. And therefore, even today, when you walk into the old building of the KEM hospital, if you go, say, for instance, to ward number 10 or ward number 9, you will find that it's a long east-west ward, ample corridors on either side, which of course now are also used to house the patients, tall ceilings, and plenty of circulation of air and light. So that credit goes to Dr. Jivraj Mehta. And this is a subsequent report made when application was made for recognition of the Seth Godandas Sundardas Medical College for postgraduate medical degrees and diplomas. And you can see that some of the experts are still the same. So we have Dr. Nadgir, we have Dr. Raghavendra Rao, and now we have some additional experts. We have Dr. S.R. Mungaonkar, who was a very, very eminent and well-reputed surgeon in Bombay. And they had no hesitation in saying that we recommend that the Seth GS Medical College should be recognized. If you read the paragraph 4, that is the operational paragraph. And that is the first batch of medical students and staff. The date is given as 1925. But unfortunately, I cannot trace the original photograph. And this copy is nowhere near satisfactory. But I can identify some individuals. Here is Dr. Jivraj Mehta. Here is Dr. R.N. Cooper. But I can't really say with any degree of certainty about the rest. I now want to end this talk with a reference to some startling error which has prevailed for quite some time. I don't know who has designed this logo. It has always been there as far as I know, but I don't know who has designed it. You will notice that this logo has a central star here with wings on it. A wing on this side and a wing on this side. And it has two snakes, one here and one here. Now, this error was compounded during the 90th anniversary of the Sage GS Medical College and KEM Hospital. And we still have the two wings, we still have the central star, and we still have two snakes, one snake here and one snake here. And this is at the time when we already had our multi-story new building, which was up and running by that time. Now, why is this a catastrophe? This is a catastrophe because whoever has designed the logo has not gone into the history of medicine. The Greeks, the ancient Greeks, worshipped almost as a god of medicine a gentleman by the name of Aesculapius. And there were many, many temples erected in the name of Aesculapius in various Greek cities. Now, you must remember that at that time, part of Western Turkey was also occupied by Greece. So that was also Greek territory. And there are a few of these Aesculapian temples in Western Turkey as well. So the person who was worshipped was Aesculapius. In order to commemorate him, they used to build big hospitals. Big meaning by their standards big. And they were pavilion type of hospital. And the patients were kept on the floor on mattresses and things like that. And because they believed that snakes can convey immortality, they worship snakes. Why did they believe that snakes can convey immortality? Because every year the snake sheds its skin and then it develops a new skin. So to their mind, that was a sign of renewing its own life every year. Now, this is their concept of Aesculapius, the Greek god of medicine and health. See what he has in his hand. A single star, and a single snake. This is Aesculapian star. And diagrammatic. This is completely different. It has nothing to do with Aesculapius. It has to do with the herald of the Greek gods, a man called Hermes. The Romans eventually called him Mercury. This Hermes was the messenger of the gods. So because he was a messenger of the gods, he had to travel very quickly. So he needed wings. So he was provided wings. And he was also provided snakes. I don't know whether it was for protection or whatever else. So when we use this kind of a symbol in medicine and in health, we are making a big mistake. We are paying a tribute to Hermes instead of paying a tribute to Aesculapius. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk, sir. It was extremely interesting and it was a joy to learn about the history of the institution. I don't think I shall enter the college again without looking at it in a different light. We seem to have some questions, sir, for you. The first one is about Mulji Jetha. They're asking, how did the cloth merchant Mulji Jetha, who was the benefactor of Gordhandas Sundardas, accrue all of his wealth, and what were his roots?
He was a merchant, he was a trader, and he owned huge properties because from his cloth trade, he earned a lot of money. And so from this cloth trade, the money that he earned from there was invested in a whole range of enterprises. He developed some mills. He had properties in Baikala and different parts of Bombay and maybe even outside Bombay. So he multiplied his wealth with a lot of wisdom and with a lot of, shall we say, common sense. And I think he was also a very, very straightforward and honest individual. And so he was trusted by everyone.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question here by Gargi Goel. She's asking you what the name of the book written by Florence Nightingale on the architecture of hospitals is called.
I will have to look up. I don't remember offhand. I will look up. I will mail it to you and you can pass it on to me.
Yes, sir, I'll do that. So we also have some comments. Gargi Goel is saying it was a excellent talk. Miss Lona is saying it was a wonderful talk, sir. Also a comment from Dr. Mario Vaz, sir, who says, thank you very much for that scholarly and informative talk. We also have a question by Harshal Kulmethe, who's asking if you can tell us a little bit about Hansa ma'am's contributions.
Yes, it would be a very great pleasure to talk about her because she really deserves a lot of honor and a lot of respect from us. First of all, she came from a very erudite family in Vadodara, what we call Vadodara today. And they used to call Baroda in those days. And in fact, when she decided to get married to Jivraj Mehta, there was a little opposition to that because Jivraj Mehta was from the community of traders, whereas Hansa Mehta was an Nagar Brahman. That meant that she was in the highest of highest caste. But she said that that is not important. If the two of us are compatible and if we feel that we can make a life together, we should be allowed to do so. And her parents were wise enough to see that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, her father was the Diwan to the Gaikwad of Baroda. And she had quite a bit of her training abroad in London. And then she was a member of the Constituent Assembly of India. And she participated in the creation of the Indian Constitution. And she was there on the 15th of August 1947, very close to Jawaharlal Nehru, when he made that famous speech, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny. And she was sitting very close to him when he made that kind of thing. She had amongst her friends Sarojini Naidu and many, many other eminent ladies, intellectuals, politicians in India. So, very remarkable lady. She was the first Vice Chancellor of the SNDT University in Bombay. She was the first Vice Chancellor of the University of Baroda. And there are more. There are some more achievements also, but I think this gives you an idea of her abilities. And I'm sure she must have been a massive help to Dr. Jivraj Mehta.
So there's one last question from Dr. Ketan Parikh, sir, who asks, how is it that Topiwala National Medical College came up before GS in spite of such reputed and powerful people rooting for it?
The Topiwala National Medical College had a bit of a problem at its inception, in that the University of Bombay refused to recognize it. I am not aware of the exact reasons why the University of Bombay didn't recognize. So for the first few years, the graduates of the Topiwala National Medical College got degrees from the College of Physicians and Surgeons. So they became LCPS, Licentiate of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and not the degrees that were given to Grand Medical College and KEM Hospital and GS Medical College. It took some years for them to overcome this crisis. And then, of course, the University of Bombay recognized the Topiwala National also. I think Topiwala National has just brought out a very big souvenir of, I don't know what anniversary, but very major anniversary. And so if we can get hold of that souvenir, we may learn a lot about this from there.
Sir, one last question by Dr. Nanasaheb Chowdhury, sir, who asks whether it was true that Dr. Gharpure was the first dean before Dr. Jeevraj Mehta.
No, there was no dean before Dr. Jeevraj Mehta. Dr. Jeevraj Mehta was selected as the dean by the Municipal Corporation of Greater Bombay. And so when the college was founded, Jeevraj Mehta was already the dean of the college, and it was necessary to do this because he had to select equipment, he had to select books, he had to decide what the appearance of the ward should be, what the appearance of the college should be. Incidentally, this concept of having the college and the hospital in adjacent interconnected buildings is also unique. And that is also a design which Dr. Jeevraj Mehta had conceived. So you have the college on one side, and then you have the hospital on the other side, almost forming like a letter L. And the two wings are connected to each other so that in the rains, the patients, the students, the teachers don't get wet in going from one to the other. So this unique design of the college and hospital, but also the genius of Dr. Jeevraj Mehta.
Sir, and one last question here, again by Harshal Gulmethe. Why were the tombs removed from the hospital building?
I am not aware of these tombs. There was some such discussion some time ago, but and at that time we tried to conduct a search in the hospital of where these tombs could have been kept. Where were these tombs? And I'm afraid at that time we could not find any such tombs. So if Dr. Kulmethe has evidence that there were tombs, I would be very, very grateful for information on them, because then we can focus our search and maybe we can learn much more.
So we also have a lot of comments here. Dr. Nilama ma'am says that your talk was very interesting today and it has made her understand what a privilege it was to study and learn at KEM Hospital. Dr. Animesh Jain says it was very nice to learn about the history of St. Gordandas Sundardas Medical College and thanks you. Dr. Bharat Kelkar sir says it was a very informative talk about our alma mater and thanks you. Dr. Lalita Nayak says it was an awesome, amazing and engrossing talk with priceless information. And it has to be from Dr. Pandya. Thank you, sir.
Now, incidentally, I think these tombs were probably a mistake. They probably wanted to refer to the domes on the tops of the buildings. So there is a correction by Dr. Pradeep Vaidishwar that it is not tombs that were removed, but it is the domes that were removed. So why the domes were removed, I have no idea. But I think it was an architecturally very unsound move, because the domes were an embellishment. They added beauty to the building of the hospital. And when they were removed, the hospital lost a very important part of its character.
So I think we'll conclude for the day. Before everyone leaves, I'd just like to remind everyone that there will be no lecture scheduled for the next Saturday, that is to say on the 22nd of October because of Diwali. We'll be seeing you on the 29th of October for one more lecture by Dr. Pandya titled Some of Our Eminent Teachers. Additionally, tomorrow, 16th October, marks Manusmriti, which is a program held by the Dr.M.V.L.Kothari Chair and Division of Medical Humanities to commemorate and celebrate Dr. Manu-V.L.Kothari. I shall be sending the link of the program on the group. It is a lecture held by Dr. Ravi Ramakantan titled Not a Case of. We look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you so much. See you.
Incidentally, there's one other comment by Dr. Vinita Salvi, which is relevant. She said that these domes contain water tanks and they were removed when an additional floor was added because the weight probably became too much for the new roof to bear. And so perhaps that is why the domes were removed, because they were containing water tanks.